Hey everyone, this is a session that was presented in Albania Dreaming about Agentforce and Agentforce Revenue Management or Revenue Cloud. For an agenda for today, I'll talk about a little bit about an introduction, why and what is revenue management, talk a little bit about revenue agents, and showcase a small demo, and have some closing thoughts as well at the end and share some additional resources for all of what we just talked about. Just for the simplicity of the recording, I took some screenshots for the demo. Happy to share any video recording for the demo as well. A little bit about an introduction about myself. My name is Khaled Halabieh. I'm a principal technical architect here at Stratus Carta. I've been in the Salesforce ecosystem for around 10 years now and mostly specialized in Revenue Cloud for the majority of that time. Something about myself is I love to travel and experience different cultures, and I also enjoy doing Muay Thai in my free time. Here at Stratus Carta, we're specialized in Revenue Cloud implementations through all the life cycle of the quote to cash process, product modeling, pricing complexities, etc. So why and what is revenue management? We've seen that the biggest challenges that we typically see within a quote to cash process is the disconnected systems that are within that process. So we typically see it as different buckets within the process. So we have the product modeling or the catalog, the pricing complexities, CPQ when it's quoting, anything related to billing, and that would typically live, in multiple different systems, contracting and where the assets lives, and also the orders and the processing of all of that. And all of that processes create complexities along the way, and this is where kind of Agentforce Revenue Management comes into the picture. A little bit of a history first. So before we got into Agentforce Revenue Management, Salesforce had two products that were in the Revenue Cloud space. The first one was the CPQ Managed Package, or Steelbrick CPQ Managed Package. And then we also had the more specialized, industry-specific kind of CRM solution, which was called Vlocity. And now we have Agentforce Revenue Management, which is kind of a combination of the two. And as I talked about, it streamlines the process of the quote to cash process through those different buckets that we talked about. So about anything related to the catalog or the product catalog and pricing, then you talk about quoting, contracting, and how you do your ordering and your decompositions and processing for orders. Switching into asset lifecycle management to deal with your, amendments, renewals, cancellations, all of these different processes that you can do with assets. And then obviously at the end we have also billing as well, with all the schedules, the rate cards, and all of that stuff. Within that as well, we wanted to emphasize that Revenue Cloud is also API first. So anything that you want to process through all of those steps along the way in the quote to cash process are leveraged through the power of APIs. So this is just a sample about kind of an initial part of the quote to cash process. So the first kind of swim lane is more or less on the user experience perspective. So when a sales rep, creates a quote, goes in, browses the catalog, adds a product, and then calculates and does their calculations on pricing. The second swim lane more or less talks about the objects at the back end that are being interacted with throughout that process. But the most important thing that we wanted to highlight through this kind of swim lane or process is the third swim lane, which are all the APIs at the back that are being called out Um, that gives us the ability to approach things differently than how they were being done in CPQ, the managed package, or even Velocity, where you can create, different configurators. You can go headless with it. They can be called from multiple different places, and execute those processes through the different APIs that are being called within the process. And this is where it becomes a little bit more interesting with revenue agents. So revenue agents come and sit within the quote to cash process and help our sales reps execute their day-to-day, things that they do within the quote to cash process, while building the quote, while being able to add their products and bundles with recommendations, while they're ordering the quotes and all of that stuff. And Revenue Cloud also comes with out-of-the-box revenue agents. And obviously, these agents augment how these different teams or personas within the quote to cash process execute to bring more efficiencies to the teams, and automate some of the processes that they have. So this is where, just as a simplified graph on where agents and sellers live together within Salesforce. So you can see the agents helping the sales reps within their opportunity management and quote management when they're creating a quote and adding their products. And during all of this time, you're giving additional power to your sellers throughout the process. So in order to configure an agent, and I think there's a lot of resources as well to talk about Agentforce and agents within Salesforce. So you need to create your topics, your actions, and then also within that your inputs and outputs. And different agent actions can be, any type of those automations that we see: flows, Apex, APIs, integration procedures, or prompt templates. And each one of those capabilities bring different powers to, while we're configuring our Revenue Cloud, in order to give those additional capabilities and efficiencies to our sellers as well. And then just to highlight a little bit about the demo. So we just went through a use case on an account page where we're creating a new opportunity from that account page. After that, we're creating a new quote from the new quote button. Once we create the new quote, we're going into the browse catalog button to enter the catalog that we have, selecting the catalog, and being able to select our residential fiber bundle. And then we have, within that bundle, we'll have different attributes to give different flavors of our product, and add additional children bundles or children products that we have within that bundle, the residential fiber bundle. Then you're able to add multiple discounts on that specific line, to be able to change and give more competitive pricing for your different accounts that you're working on. Once you're done with your quote, you can order that quote, and then obviously the order will inherit the all the transaction that has happened within the quote and the quote lines into the order and order lines. And then what's interesting is that once the order is activated, now you have different assets that live within that account. And the asset kind of data model is quite significantly different than how at least we used to do it back in the managed package Steelbrick CPQ, where now we don't have the distinction between, you know, something called an asset and something called a subscription. Everything lives within the assets model, and then the asset itself is kind of a nice structure with kind of the two main objects being the asset state period and the asset actions. And the asset state period has all the different transactions that has happened within their periods and their quantities, and the asset action is anything that caused that change on that specific asset. So you can see one asset action for the initial sale and the quantity and the price related to it. So once we go into the account, now that we can see the assets, this is when we can do what we call the ARC transactions, so amend, renew, or cancellations. So once I select my assets and I choose on amend, this is where I can choose an amend date, something similar to what we've seen within managed package CPQ. You can do your transaction. In this use case scenario, we were amending a residential fiber. We're kind of canceling and replacing it with a residential fixed wireless bundle. We execute our order and activate the order, and then you'll see that the asset data model just included more lines to represent those different transactions that has happened on the specific asset, with the initial sale and then the down sale, and then the different periods that all of these transactions have been tied against. Now, this is kind of a standardized, typical, you know, seller-led experience on the browser from within Salesforce. Now, this is where it becomes more interesting with Agentforce, where, as I mentioned before, you can add more efficiencies to your sales rep with Agentforce. So in here, what I'm trying to showcase is within Agentforce, we just typed a prompt to create the account for us, and then Agentforce right away created the account and the opportunity tied to it. And now that we're seeing, I then prompted it to create a quote and add a product with a 20% discount. And then Agentforce by itself creates the quote and adds the relative product, and adds also the discount to it as well. And this is where, you know, instead of the sales rep going into and creating the quote, creating the opportunity, creating the quote, going to browse catalog, selecting the product, adding the discount, I was able within, you know, two straightforward prompts, less clicks, more time efficiency, have this all being led with the seller and having the power of Agentforce as well. What's more interesting as well is that this is kind of the straightforward path, and then we can see more complex scenarios where we also are seeing more and more, you know, sellers wanting more of a scenario based quoting, where you have multiple quotes and each quote is within a different scenario, different quantities, different discounts, all of this stuff. So we wanted a scenario where we wanted to create, you know, 3 different quotes. Each quote is with a different quantity to give a different discount. And instead of the quote, instead of the seller going into the in Salesforce, creating, you know, the first quote, adding the product, cloning, changing the quantities and discounts, then cloning again. Now within one prompt, I just asked Agentforce to create, you know, 3 quotes for me, add the different products with the different discounting that we have, and within one prompt, it was able to create 3 different quotes for me, with the different discounting and product additions and the different permutations that I want to create within my quote. And as you can see, this is just example of the 30 quantity license for the residential fiber with its respective discount as well. Um, and this is all because of the power of all the APIs that we have that we can leverage within Revenue Cloud to enhance our seller efficiencies through the quote to cash process. Some closing thoughts related to AI in general and Revenue Cloud. With all the different technologies, Agentforce being one of them, we're seeing a lot of accelerators, and especially with the announcement that was done about Headless 360 as well. We're seeing more and more accelerators that are bringing more and more efficiencies for sellers, including prompt-based quoting, prompt-based approvals, all of these tools that are enhancing and basically changing the way quote to cash is being executed with agents along the way. And that's quite interesting to see. Some additional resources as well for anyone who is wanting to learn more about Revenue Cloud and Agentforce for Revenue Cloud as well. I attached some links within this deck for your reference. Thank you so much, and see you soon.